Chapter 11. About men who were an obstacle to the work of government by coming between Queen Zawditu and myself. There had existed between Queen Zawditu and my father, H. Ras McConnell, a friendship of mutual confidence and consideration. Over and above their relationship, and seeing me with my father's eye, she showed for me almost a mother's regard. Moreover, legit Ieyasu had done us some sort of injustice, intending to sadden and to offend both of us. He had forcibly evicted Queen Zawditu, lest she should dwell in her father's capital, Addis Ababa, and sent her to Haile to stay there like a prisoner, lest I should live in my father's city of Haile, or in the capital Addis Ababa. He ordered me by treat of force to go to Kaffa, pretending it was a way of an appointment. But as God in his goodness had caused legit Ieyasu to be disposed, and us to be chosen, Queen Zawditu to Ethiopia's crown and throne, and me as Ethiopia's crown prince and regent plenipotentiary. We marveled at this and lived in amity and concord. Previous to that, on the 17th of Mascaram 1909, which equals to the 27th of September 1916, the officers with the troops, the archbishop, and in charge with the priest, being assembled together and proffering advice while choosing the queen for the crown and throne, and me for the succession to the throne and regency plenipotentiary, had defined for us the following allocation of duties for our establishment and our work. 1. That the queen should take the honor of crown and throne and be called Queen of Queens. 2. That I, being called Crown Prince of Ethiopia, should beyond that take the regency plenipotentiary and carry out in full all the work of government. 3. That I, selecting the officers of the army, should appoint and dismiss them. 4th, that I, sitting in court, should judge all the civil and criminal appeals which the judges had handed down in the first instance. 5th, that I should conclude by negotiations any matters whatsoever concerning relations with foreign governments. After we had carried on for about a year, undertaking in accord the work that had been assigned and given to us, some men who were seeking their own benefit alone came between us and set about attempting to destroy our unity and to estrange us from each other. What they told the Queen as principal proof of their contention was that if appointments and dismissals and all the other aspects of government remained in the hands of the Crown Prince, there would be no one who would fear and respect the Queen. For it was necessary that the authority of the Queen should enter in the appointment of army officers and ministers, in the balancing of provisional governmentship and establishment of hereditary land rights, in the allocation of money, and in all similar matters. They sought to establish that the judicial decisions which those who acted as judges had handed down should not, after they had come before me on appeal, to upset against them. They therefore told the Queen that it would be good if she sat in court, pretending that it was for the sake of the Queen's honor. The object of all this was to see that the old habits should not be changed and education not be developed. Apart from this, everything I was doing I intended to be for the dignity of the realm and the prosperity and welfare of the people. Yet, they were talking to the Queen by interpreting all this in a bad way and by dissimulating to her. For example, 1. When I granted a contract to the French company called Bayard thinking that it would be of great advantage to the government and people if the minerals existing in Ethiopia was extracted from where they lie buried. They spread the rumors as if we had by this inflicted damage upon our country. 2. If aeroplanes were introduced into our country, then it might be with the object of scaring off and frightening some idlers who were disturbing the country's security. When therefore I arranged for an aeroplane to arrive that had been purchased from France with the intention that it should expedite the turnaround of postal services and transport of people in each province, they spread it about that this was to destroy by plane the entire Queen's party and to deprive her by force of the crown and throne. Moreover, I encountered great trouble in setting free the slaves. As to these men who were seeking to the Queen under false pretenses and coming between us, at times she would follow their counsel without examining its uselessness to the government, yet useful to themselves. Hence, I had great trouble in carrying out the work of government according to my plans. Nevertheless, some great noblemen, notable Ras Kassas, would speak to the Queen as they were saddened at the work of government being frustrated by the fraudulent advice of a few men and at our remaining behind in civilization. They convinced her of the usefulness for us in carrying out the work of government according to the assignment we had given. When the Queen and I were first chosen, she therefore disregarded most of the advice tendered to her by others. About the improvement by ordinance and proclamation of internal administration, and about the efforts to allow foreign civilization to enter Ethiopia. Ever since the 17th of Mascaram 1909, which is the 27th of September 1916, when I became Crown Prince of Ethiopia and Regent Plenipotentiary, until now in 1928, which is 1935, when this great danger came upon us by the violent activity which Italy unleashed against us, we did not cease to struggle to the utmost extent possible for everything that appeared to us to render honor to the government and prosperity to the people. Although we appointed ministers for all the work, there was yet a great deal of thought and effort required of us, since the ultimate responsibility was ours. Moreover, according to the custom of Ethiopian kings, which has survived from antiquity, we sat in court 2 days in every week, Wednesdays and Fridays, as it was principal aspect of our work to adjudicate cases on appeal. Thus, we had no time for respite. Apart from the minor chores which we carried out daily, and apart from what we have forgotten because of the lapse of time, the following is some of the major work which we now remember. 1. Prior to 1909, which is 1916, ministers had been appointed for all the work of government, but no proper allocations of duties in writing had been given to them for all their work. And as they did not have adequate office accommodation, it was in their private houses that they frequently carried on their ministerial businesses. But from 1913, which is 1920, onwards, and the operations of government were gradually strengthened out as it was imported from the European regulations and books which were suitable for all their work, and as we arranged for offices to be built for each of the ministers and provided them with the foreign advisors whom we assigned to the ministerial's activities. 2. The entire situations in court did not work out equitably, but from 1914, which equals to 1921, onwards, we provided each court with written regulations and reference books, and consequently things gradually improved very much. Moreover, by virtue of our causing to the stop and cutting off of hands and feet, which had been laid down in the Fatah Nagast, and had been customary for a very long time, and of similar cruel punishment, our whole people were very pleased. 3. The custom as regards punishment, which had persisted since ancient times, was that if a man had committed a criminal act, the judge had the power to do as he pleased. If the punishment was in terms of money, he could decrease or increase the fine. If it was in terms of imprisonment, he could shorten or lengthen the period of imprisonment. but there was no fixed punishment, either in terms of fines or imprisonment. Thus, if the judge thought to benefit his friends by his judgment or to injure his enemy, there was no law that would prevent him from doing so. Consequently, if two men were caught in having committed the same crime, the judge was able, if he so desired, to punish one and to let off the other without punishment. But since 1923, which equals to 1930, we had established a criminal code which provided that every act that was criminal, having been laid down in detail, whoever had committed a certain crime would pay such and such a fine, or be imprisoned for such and such a period. Consequently, we saw to it that the arrest and release according to the judge's whims ceased, i.e., that he could no longer benefit his friends and injure his enemies or impose fines as he pleased. Justice now took a road that had honor. Again, after a murderer had been condemned to death, either by confessing to the murder or by witnesses testifying against him, he used to be handed over to the avenger, i.e., the victim's closest relative, who would, in front of the assembled people, kill him in any manner he wished, by battering him as he pleased and by increasing his anguish. But now we have set up a special place where a murderer is to die and have arranged the government executioner alone, without anyone seeing it, should kill him painlessly with a rifle that possesses a special aim. Fourth, with a view to having disputes settled in an improved manner, when natives and foreigners were engaged in litigation, we caused from 1913, which equals to 1920, onwards, special courts to be established and appointed judges experts in the law. As we assigned to the judges foreign advisors knowledgeable in the law and justice, the administration of justice greatly improved. The advisor appointed for this task was a native of Switzerland, M. Amberson. This grave accord affecting the honor of the country had been contained in the treaty which the French envoy M. Kobolski had made with Emperor Menelik in 1900, which equals to 1907 to 8. Fifth, as there did not exist in Ethiopia anything like an adequate printing press for books, all books had to be written by hand. Consequently, all the people had great difficulty in finding and reading in books. The reason was that it was not possible to make available to everybody books written by hand because the price was very high. From 1914, which equals to 1921 to 22, onwards, and many books in Jazez and in Amharic with interpretation were printed. The entire people therefore derived much benefit from reading what they could buy at a low price. A weekly paper called Light and Peace and a monthly paper called Revealer of the Light were being printed by these presses. We gave the income of the printing houses as the endowment of the Bet Sadi Hospital. We desired our printing presses to be established with the government's money, and when it was handed over to Mata Tabas Press, many books and stationery for the work of each ministry as well as similar matters were printed there. The weekly paper called Ayamaro was also printed at this press. 6. Prior to 1915, which equals to year 1922, there were no regulations as regards to loans. Anyone who possessed money might lend it and had interest rate of 20% to 30%. And when the debtor did not have the money to pay, he would be arraigned before a judge and he would be handed over to the lender and be imprisoned until he paid his debt. But from 1915, which equals to 1922 to 23, onwards, we ordered that the interest rate should be 9%, and that anyone who accepted interest above that should pay a fine. If it turned out that the borrower did not have the money to pay, and after it had been ascertained that he did not have the cattle or the hereditary land that could be sold by auction, we forbade by decree of 1916, which equals to 1923, that he should be handed over to the lender. 7th, at Addis Ababa and in the other principal cities, lighting in each house was by gas or tallow or wax candle, but there was no electric light. The service, which had started to some extent in 1909, which equals to 1916 to 17, and by 1915, which is 1922 to 23, produced excellent electricity lights in the palace and in the offices of ministers, in the houses of the nobility and along the sides of the great Ras Makonnen Avenue, in the major churches and in the city of Arera and Deradawawa, and in the government buildings of Desis and Debra Mosque. In the major churches and in the cities of Arera and Daradawa, and in the government buildings of Desisi and Deborah Makos. 8th, previously the sons of foreign kings and princes used not to come to Ethiopia, but since 1916, which equals year 1923 to 24, because we are directed that the foreign civilization should enter the country, the sons of foreign royalty and princes would come to Ethiopia for a visit. Chief among these were the Duke of Gloucester, son of the English King H.M. George V, the Swedish Crown Prince Gustav Adolf, and uncle of the Italian King H.M. Victor Emmanuel, the Duke of Abruzzi and Savoy Prince de Udine. 9th, prior to 1915, which equals to 1922, apart from one motor car, there was hardly any numbers of cars or lorries in Ethiopia. And since, from the emperor downwards, it was by horse or mule that the nobles as well as the people proceeded, and as the transport of goods and similar things were carried on beasts of burden, it took a long time to reach a planned destination. But since 1915, which equals to 1922, we had seen to it that many cars, motorcycles, bicycles, and lorries were imported. Consequently, operations of all kinds were gradually accelerated. 10th, up to 1915, which equals to 1922, the Star of Solomon and of Ethiopia were the only two kinds of medals. But now we caused a gold chain to be made for Solomon order, and it was to be awarded to foreign kings who had rank corresponding to that of the emperor. We also had an order with gold chain made called the Queen of Sheba order, which is awarded to the queen consort and to foreign queens. In addition to this, we had orders of the very high rank made called the Menelik II and the Trinity Order, as well as the military medals and arts and science medals in their various ranks. Many people were awarded these orders. 11th, there were few people who could speak foreign languages because there was only one school, the Menelik II School, at Addis Ababa, in which institution in foreign languages were offered. But since 1917, which equals to year 1924, we established at Addis Ababa and the other foreign cities schools for the instruction in foreign languages. In addition to the schools which existed before, we gave permission and aid to various missions, and consequently, language schools were opened in each province. Furthermore, since many boys whom we had sent abroad had been properly educated, many of them were now able to work in the offices of various ministries. 12th, as there was only one hospital called the Menelik II Hospital in existence at Addis Ababa, it was not sufficient to protect the health of the entire population. But from 1915, which equals to year 1922, onwards, we had many hospitals established at Addis Ababa and the other major cities. We gave permission and financial aids to various missions, and as hospitals were being built, the health of many people began to be safeguarded. Furthermore, we had arranged to have the Swedish physician M. Hanna appoint to the hospital which we had named Bet Saida and which we had established at Addis Ababa with our private money, the hospital's name became well known and widely respected. 13th, in previous times, all men who were soldiers were sold only by customs, but there was no military school. But from 1911, which equals to 1918 to 19 onwards, we established a military college and saw to it that the soldiers should learn the entire military craft at the college. In addition to this, we set up under the auspices of our son McConnell, Duke of Aera, a Boy Scouts movement, so that the boys should carry out all their duties well. 14th, in the past, there was only a flag with a lion and 3 colours, but from 1920, which equals to 1927 to 28, onwards, we commanded that the Emperor's daily ceremonial flag, while on change in the 3 colours, should differ in the design of a lion and in the gold ornamentation, that the flag of the Queen and of the Crown Prince of the Army and the postal services, as well as for sheep, should be distinct in ornamentation and shaped, while on change in the 3 colours. 15th, at any time, foreign national anthems could be heard in Ethiopia on a gramophone, but there was nothing that might be called Ethiopia's national anthem. But now, since 1920, which equals to 1927 to 28, there has appeared a distinct Ethiopian national anthem and march, Tafari, a military march. It is to be heard at the palace and any other appropriate place when Ethiopian envoys go abroad and a reception or banquet is given in their honor. When foreign envoys come to Ethiopia, we arrange to have their national anthem played at the reception or banquet in their honor. 16th, since the 1900, which equals to 1907, there had been set up in Addis Ababa the Bank of Abyssinia under the auspices of the National Bank of Egypt. But apart from this one bank, there was no other. The excess over and above the profit stipulated in the treaty when this Bank of Abyssinia was set up belonged exclusively to the company. Consequently, the position was very difficult for the government and the people. Therefore, in 1920, which equals to 1927 to 28, we invested our own private money in shares and made the nobles and the people shareholders as far as possible. We then bought the Bank of Abyssinia, having paid off its entire deficit and consequently having designated in the Bank of Ethiopia. There turned out to be a great advantage in this move. 17th, prior to 1920, which equals to 1927 to 28, the word aeroplane was not very well known in Ethiopia. But from 1920, which equals to 1927 to 28, onwards, some aeroplanes having been purchased, we brought them to Ethiopia, and subsequently many difficulties for governments and people were gradually elevated. 18th, since there were no Ethiopian legations or consulates in foreign countries, a special envoy had to be sent for a very matter concerned with foreign governments, or a foreign representative, having been specially delegated, had to deliver the message. But since 1921, which equals to 1928 to 29, we ordered legations to be established with neighboring governments and consulates with the far-off ones. All government businesses was, therefore, dispatched without trouble. 19th, as the import of war materials with Ethiopia had been prohibited, the number of worthless idlers in each province increased. From 1920, which equals to 1927 to 28, onwards, it was permitted by treaty that we may purchase arms for the protection of the country. Security and peace were established in Ethiopia by virtue or our directors to destroy these faithless men by supplying arms to those protecting the country in each district. We cannot forget at the time when it was permitted to import these war materials in Ethiopia, the objection of the Italian envoy arguing that the Ethiopian government should not be allowed warplanes. This proves that having destroyed peace, the Italians have been planning and preparing for a long time to make war on Ethiopia. 20th. As it has been claimed that it is forbidden by law that the bishops be appointed, chosen from among the pirates who are natives of Ethiopia, Ethiopians still remain in the position of not being appointed. But since 1920, which equals to 1927 to 28, we have emphasized the large numbers of Ethiopian provinces, the fact that all believers in Christ are not such by innate distinctness, but by virtue of conduct, and because after discussions we had succeeded in making this point, we caused the appointment to the dignity of bishop of 5 priories chosen from among the Ethiopians nationals and assigned them to the discourses. 21. Previously, there had not existed the custom to invite the dispatch of special envoys from foreign governments to attend the coronation of the emperor. But now that we have seen to it that Ethiopia should progress on the path to even higher civilization, and that she should strengthen the ties of friendship with foreign governments, when therefore we were crowned emperor on the 23rd of Twekamet 1923, which equals to your 2nd of November 1930. The representatives of 12 governments came to Addis Ababa and honored our coronation. This proves Ethiopia's ascent to higher level during our time. 22. The emperor used to carry out, in accordance with his own wishes and directions, any sort of peaceful and military operations, as well as administration of the country and anything else like this. But now, on the 19th of Amel 1923, which equals to your 16th of July 1931, we promulgated a constitution, set up a parliament, appointed senators, and caused deputies to be selected. We appointed presidents for these and directed that all the businesses of government should be carried out on the basis of advice from Parliament. 23. The emperor or the nobles used to retain a large army, contingent while moving from one province to another, and the people were forced to produce provisions without payment, such as food, forage, and wood. But since 1923, which equals to your 1930 to 31, we prohibited by proclamation that the peasants be forced to hand over any of their property, except voluntary and against payment. 24th. As the number of country districts to which telephone and telegraph communication had been extended was rather small, it took a long time to bring to an end the difficulties which the governments, trade, and people experienced in each province. Later on, however, because we had directed that the telephones be extended to every district and postal communication be established, the difficulties for the government and the people were gradually greatly elevated. 25th. The places at which criminals were being imprisoned used not to possess the cleanliness corresponding to health requirements. But since 1925, which equals to your 1932 to 33, we provided, having built it with our private money, a house that possessed washing and clinical facilities corresponding to the health requirements, as well as instructing in reading and writing and manual work. The fettering of criminals by iron and chain fixed at their feet having ceased, we ordered that they be granted by warders. 26. Every man who possessed the land 26. Every man who possessed land in addition to the tax fixed and payable annually used to be forced to pay additional money on various occasions and to be liable to forced labor without pay. But now, apart from taxes fixed and payable once a year, we prohibited by regulations and proclamations anyone to work forced labour without pay or to render any other excess dues. 27. Needless to say, in Europe, there existed wireless telegraphy. Clearly, audible wireless services were not known in Ethiopia. But since 1924, which is your 1931, we had given orders for wireless telegraphy to be established at Addis Ababa and other major provinces. Hence, every aspect of government business, of trade and other matters was speedily accomplished, both inland and abroad. In 1928, which equals your 1935 to 6, at the time when we had to fight against Italy, the service was of great benefit. 28. Prior to 1920, which equals to your 1927 to 28, no civil or military uniform indicative of rank had been specified. Hence, everybody wore same kind of uniform. But later, as we had directed the distinction of rank to be made in civil and military dress, the senatory of rank, civil and military, could be recognized by the uniform. 29th. For the past 100 years or so, if someone was robbed of money or of their possession and chattels, there were men from a family related by descent or by marriage who claimed to be able to find a thief by giving a drink of medicine to a boy under the age of 15. These men used to live wandering about in Addis Ababa and in other districts. By seeking thieves with the permission of the government, administering the medicine and receiving payment from people who had lost money. They would claim to have found the thief if the boy to whom they administered medicine went and entered a man's house and lay on the bed in the terrace, or seized the man hitting him with his knee, or forcibly lay upon him. If things were done in this way, the man was seized by force by this procedure alone, without there being any indications or witnesses to the theft, and was under an obligation to make payment to the owner who had lost his property. Since deeds like these were being carried out by lies and fraud, they were in a position to hypnotize the Labisha and to introduce him into the house of an innocent man who had not stolen anyone's property, or to arrest and oppress people by causing the boy to hit someone and to lie upon him in a trance. But afterwards, we gave orders for the Labisha method to cease, as we were convinced, after proper investigation, of the fact that it was impossible to find a thief by administering medicine, unless a thief like this had been subject to an examination by a judge or proper evidence or witnesses. Consequently, there was great rejoicing in every province, as we had protected the people from the iniquities that came upon them in this matter. 30th. Although in Ethiopia the emperor was supreme, feudal rules had not ceased. But from 1910, which is your 1917 to 18 onwards, since we had become convinced that the rule of land tenantry was detrimental to the government and people, we stopped the landed gentry in Wallo, Gojam, Bajameda, Yajud, Walaga, and Jima, and caused other servants of our government to be selected and to be appointed. 31. It had remained customary in Ethiopia for all provisional governors to be military chiefs, but there were no civil rulers. Therefore, it was not the custom for the whole country to be under the authority of government and to allocate taxes collected by civilian officials to the army and for other government businesses, but the governors used to pay soldiers through their own officers and to give them quarters in the governorate. As we were uneasy about abolishing all at once this custom which had persisted for a long time, thinking that it might provoke disturbances in the country, we arranged to demonstrate this mode of procedure and to make it acceptable in slow stages by placing under the authority of the central government the districts of Jijiga, Tachacha, Balé, Waliga, Sayo, and Jima. And we also saw to it as an instructive example that the revenues should be applied to the expenditure on the army and other government businesses. 32. Because until about 10 years ago, roads in various provinces had not been properly made up, there was inevitable a great deal of wasted time and money in travelling from one region to another. But for the past 10 years, as we were convinced of the benefit of roads to government and people, we gave orders that the roads leading from Addis Ababa to the east and west, to the north and south, be properly maintained. Hence, districts that could previously be reached in 10 or 15 days can now be reached in 2 or 3 days by car and lorry. Chapter 13. About our pressing for Ethiopia's entry into the League of Nations. When the Great World War was over, it was feared that a similarly dreadful war might break out again in the future. Therefore, if a League of Nations having been established, a quarrel arose between two governments, the willful waging of war having ceased, the matter about which the quarrel occurred would come before the League. After investigation, judgment would be given by the vote of the League, it having become manifest in accordance with the importance of the conflict, that a certain government had given offence, while another government had been a victim of that offence. On 28th of Sane, 1911, which is 21st of June 1919 to you, 27 governments had reached agreement and signed the treaty, concurring that it was improper for a strong government willfully to attack a weak one or to impose financial sanctions on it, but that if a government transgressed the wishes of the League, it would be the opponent of the entire assembly, and they were all to rise up against it in opposition. The League's principal seat was in the Swiss city of Genevieve. Some of the foreigners at Addis Ababa, having given us information by way of friendship, had spoken to us about the League. We had studied a great deal of literature about it. Consequently, we convened the great nobles and all our ministers and delivered to them the following speech. It would be of great benefit if Ethiopia were to enter the League of Nations. It is necessary, however, in future to improve gradually our entire machinery of government, and therefore we ask them to let us know their present thoughts, lest we should experience difficulties in the League if we fail to improve our governmental procedures. Once we had entered the League, the nobles and ministers declared unanimously that it was impossible to effect major improvements within 1 year, but that it was their wish to improve the entire work of government year by year in slow stages. And therefore, it was right for us to enter the League. Hence, the question of our entry was decided. After this, we sent to Genevieve a delegation with our letter on the 1st of Nashish, 1914, which is your 7th of August, 1922, consisting of Dejamach Nadawa as leader, Ato Heriyu Haile Selassie, and Ato Fasika as aides, with instructions that they should sign in our name as soon as our entry into the League had been granted. As our envoys informed us, there was a little difficulty with regard to the application which the Ethiopian government had presented in order to enter the League of Nations. But later, on the French delegate M.D. Jovenel and former French Minister Plenipotentiary in Ethiopia M. Lagarde helped a great deal, and consequently the British and the Italian delegates declared their goodwill towards Ethiopia's entry into the League of Nations. The Assembly, therefore, gave full approval, and our envoys signed the accord and returned. There was a great joy at Addis Ababa. The rejoicing was for no reason other than we thought that the covenant of the League would protect us from the sort of attack which Italy has now launched against us. Chapter 14. About our efforts to free the slaves and progressive improvement year by year in the struggle for their liberation. It had been customary in the past in Ethiopia, a part of Africa, just as it had been in Asia, Europe, and America, to sell and to buy slaves. Nevertheless, the number of those who arrived by way of sale and purchase was small, for the majority of slaves came through capture in war. The reason is that in Ethiopia from the 15th to the 18th century, the power of Muslims and pagans had prevailed against her, gradually and little by little, while many of her provinces rebelled against the reign of emperor, establishing their own nobility, looting the country. But later, on the kings before us, and a particular emperor, Melech, conquered these provinces in battle to restore them as of old to the unity of Ethiopia. And as for all those who had come by the way of capture in war, it had been the custom that they should live in slavery to their captor, in accordance with the ancient usage. Nevertheless, those who had come as prisoners of war were scarcely distinguishable in appearance, except for a few, from other Ethiopians, and therefore it is very difficult to identify them as slaves. Thus, the slavery of some was in name only, but in their mode of living they were not much different from their captors. They were able to purchase and to sell rest hereditary land ownership, or like other people to have rest rights established by the government, to attain offices or ministerial rank in government services, or in the service of the church the rank of deacon, priest, monk, or priorship of the monastic order, or the deanship of a cathedral. As they were indistinguishable in appearance and mode of life, they could even be married to the captors or his son or his relations. When the captor died, he might leave them rest and money in his will, having treated them like his own children. Again, as in practice all over the world, there are many people in each province who are doing a day's work, being taken in service for a wage. Yet, while the Italians knew all this, they spread it about that they were slaves rather than workers employed for a wage in some rich man's house. They spread these rumors extragating to the point of perjury. The story which proves this, that a rich man who was descended from the Gala family and who lived in an Era region, this man, by the abundance of his goodness and his conscience, said that it was more useful to give one's money to one's relative than to give to an alien worker, thus collected the children of his brothers and sisters and relatives and employed them for wages. But the Italian consul at Avera, without knowing or examining all of this, wrote a report to his government claiming that such and such possessed so many slaves. As this appeared to his government to be true, it preferred an indictment against us and presented it to the League of Nations. Apart from the slaves who were set free by the proclamation and ordinances which we proclamated as regards the liberation of slaves, we were doing everything possible to set free the slaves by seeking several other opportunities. Thus, the government of Benin Shagal, Sheikh Haile, told us that in this country many slaves had gone free by virtue of proclamation and ordinances, whereupon we said to him, "You cannot expect to be praised for those who are set free on the basis of the proclamation and ordinances, but if you release them of your own free will, that will bring you credit." As he told us, it is with my permission that so many slaves go free. He sent them subsequently to Addis Ababa, and we informed him that we are arranging for them to receive instructions. When those slaves were sent to Addis Ababa, we gave orders that they should receive a certificate of their liberation. They immediately entered the military school and began to study. Many of them were selected for the musical education, and Andrea Nicot, whom we had recruited from Switzerland, taught them music. When they had completed their training, we provided them with a uniform, and they lived in a clean dwelling which we had constructed for them. All the foreign envoys and consuls at Addis Ababa knew about our awarding to one of them, who had excelled in knowledge, the rank and uniform of lieutenant command of 100, and about our decorating him with an order. They also knew that others with him had carried out properly their work of musicianship. Everyone who saw and knew this Shankila, who had received the rank of lieutenant, used to admire him, for his height was 2 to 10 meters, and now we hear in Genbot 1928, which equals to your May 1936. When the Italians entered Addis Ababa, they captured him and killed him. But in view of what we have done for the emancipation of the slaves and for civilizing them through education, it is amazing that Italians should make representations to the League of Nations to the effect that Sheikh Haile had sent to the emperor a special tribute of slaves. As we have shown above, this slavery problem is recognized in the hearts of men as something that is preordained by nature in terms of master and slave, but had yet remained firmly established by custom. Consequently, Emperors Theodore, Theodoros, Johannes, and Menelik, who reigned in Ethiopia from 1845-1848 to 1906, which is your 1852-1853 to 1913, had promulgated decrees against the sale and purchase of slaves in Ethiopia. But because at the time it was not customary to set up special offices for work of this kind, their intention remained unaccomplished, as it was impossible to observe and enforce the decree on account of the vastness of the country. But now, since we accepted responsibility for the affairs of government, as regent plenipotentiary of the Ethiopian realm, we followed on the foundations laid as regards the liberation of slaves by the 3 kings whose names have been mentioned above, and let it be known by proclamation on the 22nd of Megabyte 1916, which is your 31st of March 1924, that in Ethiopia slaves were no longer to be sold or purchased. We promoted an ordinance by which people were to be punished who in future were found to be selling or purchasing slaves, and by which slaves were to go free who had come by way of purchase or capture prior to the proclamation. At Addis Ababa and in other regions, offices and courts were set up by which the proclamation and ordinances were to be enforced, and for this work we recruited an advisor from England, Mr. de Halbert, as judges and secretaries were appointed, and the entire work of administration progressively improved very greatly. Many slaves were set free. Their number was above 100,000. The number of those set free each year is to be found in the register of the League of Nations at Genevieve. Again, when in 1923, which equals to your 1931, a delegation sent by the British Anti-Slavery Society came to Addis Ababa, we informed them orally and in writing after a great deal of discussions that we shall see to it that within 15 or at most 20 years from now all slaves would go free, and that slavery would be totally eliminated from Ethiopia. But in any country, a few offenders must always be expected. And if some men are found transgressing the proclamation that has been proclamated, all the foreign envoys know that we have punished them, even with the death penalty. Therefore, our conscience does not rebuke us, for we have done unceasingly everything possible as regards the liberation of the slaves. Chapter 15. About the honor of invitations extended to us to visit Europe. Ethiopia is a realm which has lived steadfast in her independence for more than 3 millennia. But in the early 16th century, Hamad Gran emerged from the east of Ethiopia from Zilia, penetrated into central Ethiopia and forth with Emperor Lebana Dengal. The latter struggled retreating towards northern Ethiopia, while Gran set fire to all the palaces and churches, apart from a few books which had remained hidden in caves and islands. He burnt the majority of works of history and culture. Nevertheless, if anyone seeks to know Ethiopia's antiquity, there exists many books which discusses Ethiopia's history, written in Greek, Latin, Portuguese, and Arabic. And by reading these, he will be able to inform himself of her great age. It is a fact that many people had come to Ethiopia before the birth of our Lord from Jerusalem, Greece, Arabia, and Egypt. After the birth of our Lord, from the 15th century to the 18th, visits by some foreigners to Ethiopia were fairly continuous. It is only in this 19th century that Italians have begun to cast their eyes upon Ethiopia. There are many who went abroad on the part of the Ethiopian clergy, on the part of the government. However, my father, H. Ras Makonnen, had gone to Italy in 1881, which is your 1888 to 89, and to England during the reign of H.M. King Edward VIII in 1898, which equals to your 1902. In the same year, he had visited France en route. Other leaders had gone on missions to Germany, Russia, France, and Turkey. Since For this reason, Ethiopia had become known throughout Europe, and since Emperor Menelik had concluded treaties of friendship and commerce with various governments, the countries mentioned above had begun to establish consulates and legations at Addis Ababa on account of the many foreign traders and travelers arriving in Ethiopia. Later, in 1909, which equals to your 1916, when Queen Zawditu sat on the throne, she, being without son and heir, I was chosen by the will of God and by the wish of the people as Crown Prince and Regent Plenipotentiary of Ethiopia's realm, and consequently I gave full expression to the desire that the friendship with European governments begun in Emperor Menelik's time, being progressively widened and strengthened to the utmost, because the European governments had heard from their envoys at Addis Ababa and had become convinced of the fact that this is my desire was real and true. They extended to us the honor of an invitation to come to their respective countries to see the prosperity of their country, the good fortune and riches of their people, beauty of their cities, and the wisdom and knowledge of their scholars. The first invitation was from the President of French Council of Ministers, M. Poincaré. This was followed by invitations from the King of the Belgians, H.M. Albert, from Italian King H.M. Victor Emmanuel, from the King of England and Emperor of India, H.M. George V, from the King of Egypt, H.M. Fahud, from the President of the Greek Republic, Admiral Kondratieff, and from the Duchess Charlotte of Luxembourg. As we have shown above, some nobles had gone to Europe on various missions, yet it was not customary for the Crown Prince and the Regent Plenipotentiary of the realm to go abroad, and therefore these distinguished invitations which the European governments had extended to us was a strange thing for all the princes and nobles and the army. They had thus great difficulty over this matter. When we heard this, we gave instructions to have the princes and the nobles convened in a great assembly. In the end, they all accepted the matter with pleasure, because we had convinced them that by our planning to go on extending our friendship with the governments of Europe, we were causing people to meet in trade and in work and getting to know each other as a sign of friendship. That for this main purpose, kings and princes were being brought closer together in mutual direct discussions, and that this would induce them to come and visit our country. After the question of our journey had come before the assembly and had been decided, we gave orders that everything necessary for our travel be prepared. We gave instructions that while our war ministers, Fatiwari, Abita, Jigorosi, carried the principal responsibility for the affairs of the government, each minister was to be responsible for the work of his government, and that all of them should report to H.M. Queen Zawditu on everything they had done. I had the hope and conviction that my journey to Europe would give me 3 benefits. 1. To see with my own eyes European civilization and the beauty of the cities of Paris, London, Rome, Brussels, Athens, and Cairo, about which I had read in books, first at school and later on in my office. 2. When returning to my country after my visit to Europe, I thought it would be possible to initiate some aspects of civilization I had observed with my own eyes, although it would be impossible to carry this out all at once and in full. 3. to find a seaport prior to our journey. We had received some encouragement from France and Italy as regards access to the sea. Afterwards, on Thursday, the 8th of Mayazaya, 1916, which is your 16th of April, 1924, we set out from Addis Ababa and went down to Djibouti. Here are the names of the princes and nobles to whom it had been granted to accompany us. Ras Elu Tekla Emanot, Ras Seyum Magasha, Dejamach Nadwa Abba Walo, Dejamach Gasasa Wada Hana, Dejamach Gabra Selassie Barya Gaber, Dejamach Molugata Yigazu, Dejamach Ela Selassie Abayana, Ligaba Wadelaja Webi, Bautala Ayaru Wada Selassie, Lajid Makonan Edla Katawacha, Dejamach Wad Basawasan Kasa, Ato Sela Tesadula, Atu Saleh Teshadalu. When we reached Djibouti, the governor M. Julian received us with honor. And after that, on the 12th of Mayazaya, which is your 20th of April, we embarked on the Messageries, Maritimes Company's boat, Portos, and travelled to Suez Canal. As we reached the Suez Canal, an envoy of H.M. King Fahud arrived and transmitted to us the king's greetings. The patriarch Abuna Querilos sent Abuna Johans, who became patriarch later on, and gave us his blessing. When we reached Qatar, we travelled to Jerusalem on the special train which H.M. King Fahud had arranged for us. At Jerusalem, the British High Commissioner, Sir Herbert Samuel, and the bishops of the various churches came to the railway station and did us the honour of welcoming us. As by the chance of good fortune, the festival of resurrection, Easter, was approaching. We thank God for granting us to see the light of the Easter festival. Afterwards, as we toured Jerusalem and its districts, we visited and kissed all the holy places, including Bethlehem, where our Lord was born, Nazareth, where he grew up, the Jordan, in which he was baptized, Cana of Galilee, where he did miracles, the Sea of Tiberias, where he taught, and the neighboring Capernaum, Beth Saida, Magdala, as well as Hebron, where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are buried. Although a beginning and being made in discussion the affairs of our sanctuary at Jerusalem with our Coptic fathers in faith, the matter had remained unresolved, and therefore we informed the Coptic Archbishop at Jerusalem, Abuna Timotheos, in writing that he should persist pondering on our proposal. For we had suggested that we should conclude the matter after friendly discussions upon our return from Europe. He wrote to us the following reply: I have already made known your intentions to the Coptic community. Afterwards, as we had heard that the Greeks possess an area of many chambers in Golgotha, we requested the Greek Orthodox Patriarch in Jerusalem, Abuna Demianos, through the intermediacy of Dr. Savos, the Greek Consul General at Addis Ababa, that he should give one room to the Ethiopian monks as a patrimony for the celebration of Holy Mass. When he replied that they would give one room to patrimony in the monastery of Abraham, we said that we, on our part, will assign a benefice to the Greek monastery in Ethiopia. After reaching agreement and accord on the proposal, we signed the following written convention. The Ethiopian Crown Prince and Regent Plenipotentiary, Tafari Makonnen on one hand, in the name of the Ethiopian people, and Patriarch Damayanos of Jerusalem on the other hand, in the name of the Greek Orthodox community, have agreed and contracted as follows. First, His Beatitude Damayanos, in his capacity as Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem and all Palestine, on the occasions of the visit of pilgrimage to Jerusalem of the Ethiopian Crown Prince and Regent Plenipotentiary, while desirous to manifest his great good intentions for the Ethiopian people and the staunch friendship which has existed for a long time between the Ethiopian people and the Holy Church in Jerusalem, has assigned to the Ethiopian people as outright patrimony a room in the holy monastery of Abraham near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The length of the room is 18 by 70 meters. Its width is 8 to 95 meters and its height is 4 to 95 meters. The room, being the basement underneath the dining hall of the Fathers, has a strong vaulted ceiling. Its ancient doors leads to the place where the Holy Cross was found. This room has been given for the requirements of the service of the Ethiopian clergy. Second, this room is to be connected by a door to Dey El Sultan. It shall be a duty of the Ethiopians to have the opening made. The Patriarch will extend his help so that this door be opened. Third, the two front doors leading to Abraham's ministry shall be closed, but the windows are not to be blocked. Fourth, it is not permitted to sell, to exchange, or to mortgage this room, or to assign it to any other purpose except to the service of the clergy mentioned above. Fifth, before this room is redecorated, it is necessary to inform the Patriarch. He will send a person expert in this kind of work. 6. If someone else comes along, laying claim to the room given to the Ethiopian community, HB, the Patriarch accepts responsibility to argue the case. As the Crown Prince of Ethiopia and Regent Plenipotentiary, HH Tafari Makonnen desires that the friendship which existed between the Ethiopian people and the Patriarch be strengthened. He has granted permission that a representative of the Patriarch should permanently reside in Ethiopia, that the following gift be handed over, that the decree be inscribed in the land register in the name of the Patriarch in accordance with the customs of the country. The gift is as follows. First, 5 gashas of Arabelle land for the church and residence of the clergy, located no further from Addis Ababa than a day's journey. 2. He will provide 1 gasha of land for the building of the covenant and the church in the neighboring of Addis Ababa in Gulali or Shola regions. These 6 gashas of land, it has been agreed, are not to be transferred for whatever reason to a non-Orthodox community or a non-Orthodox church. 7th, the two parties who have made these mutual gifts have caused this convention to be made out in 2 equal copies and have set their seals and signatures to it. Written in the holy city of Jerusalem on the 16th of Mayazah 1916, which is your 24th of April 1924. But as it was not God's will, this treaty never came into force. After we had concluded our businesses at Jerusalem, we went to Cairo by plane on Mayazah 23rd, which is your 1st of May 1924. At Cairo, HM King Fahud received us with honor at his palace. Our pleasure was exceedingly great when both of us expressed the wishes in our discussions to go on in the future developing the friendship which had remained firm between our two governments since ancient times. On the next day, the Patriarch Abuna Querilos informed us of his intention to hold Mass and prayers in our honor in the Church of St. Mark, and we went to the church. The patriarch, suffering from weariness of old age, was seated on his throne by the altar and gave us his blessings. As the churches of the Egypt and Ethiopia were in a relationship of mother and child, and because the patriarch had for long desired the intentions of coming to Ethiopia to see his children in faith, he spoke at length of his sadness at his continued inability to come on account of the distance, while at the same time revealing the fulfillment of his desire, though at seeing with his own eyes our arrival at Cairo today. Afterwards, while we were in the church, the patriarch entered the reception hall for guests, and on one side, we having brought him, in order to honor our father in faith, a golden crown and golden cross, a golden staff, a silk tunic embroidered with gold, and a cape. He was therefore waiting for us, wearing the crown and cape, holding the golden cross in his right hand and the golden staff in his left. He was thinking to please us, although because of his great age and weariness, he was not really capable. As we entered the hall from the church, he attempted to receive us standing, but he was not able to do so. Although we were pleased in our heart at seeing his holiness and his dignity, we felt much grieved at thinking of his old age and weariness. The following are the sites which we visited during our stay at Cairo, and which we have remained memorable to us. The pyramids and the Phoenix, and the great museum of antiquities, and the great schools and hospitals and government, and of the Copters, the old churches of early times, the antiquities of Luxor, and the tomb of Tutankhamun, which had been discovered at the excavations nearby, as well as the great mosques and the famous Islamic church called Al-Azhar. Subsequently, when we saw 4 students from Ethiopia, we were pleased, as their teacher said that they would return to Ethiopia within 2 years upon conclusion of their studies. From Cairo, we went to Alexandria and paid homage at the tomb of St. Mark. We then saw the school at which they are teaching more than 4,000 boys, and which had been instituted near the church by Abuna Johannes, the Deputy Archbishop of the See of St. Mark. After this, we visited Victoria College, which had been built at a place called Ramla, near Alexandria, where some boys from Ethiopia were studying. The headmaster of the school, Mr. Reed, was like a father, particularly to the boys from Ethiopia, and we had heard of his gentle treatment and of his teaching. And among the boys there, we met Sirach Arya. Our hearts was touched with joy when we saw them face to face. The son of Ras Muligageta Asarata, and a boy called Gebra Medhin. Our car had come with us in order to study at the school, and we handed them over into the headmaster's care and trust. Chapter 16. About our journey from Alexandria to Paris. On the 1st of Janbot, which is the 9th of May 1924, we embarked on a boat called Quadrilla, and when the ship began its journey, a farewell salute was fired by cannon. On the 6th of Janbot, which is your 14th of May, when we had passed Corsica and came within the view of the great fortifications at Toulon, a warship came to receive us. From there, until we approached Marseilles, many aeroplanes were hovering in the air, as 5 warships passed on the right and the left of our ships. They fired their guns. As we disembarked from the ship, the prefect of the district of Marseilles and the mayor of the city, together with many officials, received us. Among these, we were very pleased to see and to meet M. Lagarde, who since the days of my father H. Ras Makonnen had been the friend of Ethiopia and ourselves, and had formerly been France's envoy extraordinary and minister's plenipotentiary in Ethiopia. After we had rested a little in Marcellinus government buildings, the officers of the warships came and took us to the sea once more in order to show us the warships. Thus, we saw the strength of the construction and the size of the guns, and then returned greatly impressed. On the morrow, 8th of Gembot, which is the 16th of May, in the evening we departed by train for Paris, and when we reached Paris at 4:30 in the morning, which is your 10:30 a.m., the new President of the Republic, H.E.M. Millenard, and the Prime Minister, M. Poincaré, all the ministers in full, Marshal, Foch, and many other generals received us with great honour. It was in the Quai d'Orsay, in the palace of the foreign ministers, that quarters had been prepared for us, and seated with the president in the automobile, we proceeded along the parade. After we had rested a little in the palace, we went on to return visits to the president and the Republic of the Ailes Palace, and subsequently returned. The program had laid down that afterwards we should visit the Paris municipality, Hotel de Ville, and at the appointed hour we proceeded there. When we arrived, we found assembled there the President of the Republic and all the ministers, army officers, and the city's notables. When we entered the Great Hall, the Mayor, President du Conseil Municipal, M. Juilliard, and the President of the Municipal Councillors made a speech of friendship, which greatly touched our hearts, and they expressed to us their pleasure. All the amazing things which we saw in Paris and its surroundings were very numerous. Of the many sights we saw during our stay in Paris, the following are the principal ones: the tomb of Napoleon, Invalides, the airport and the aeroplane displays, a tank parade and a movement exercise, the Opera Notre Dame de Paris, the Palace of Justice, the Mint. This is the place where the coins were struck, on which the figure of Menelik II appears. The offices of the Legion d'Honneur, the Eiffel Tower, the Palace of Versailles, the Palace of Fontainebleau, the Radio Assemble Hall in St. Elise, perhaps St. Assise, the Artillery College and Artillery Range. It was quite impossible to express in words, on account of the abundance of the joy in our heart, the pleasure we felt until the official visit ended. When we were hearing speeches of friendship, which were delivered at the receptions and banquet, beginning with the President of the Republic, H.E.M. Millard, and including the Prime Minister, M. Poincaré, and other French authorities, and also when we inspected the various palaces which we have enumerated above. When our official visit was over, we thought of staying on here in Paris in order to have friendly discussions about some matters with the French government and with the Franco-Ethiopian Railway Company. And secondly, as we were desirous to rest here in Paris on our return at the conclusion of each of the official visits to the other governments who had done us the honor of invitation, we told our friend M. Lagarde that he should seek and arrange for us a rented rest house. When he let us know of the readiness of the house on the outskirts of Paris called Villa Camastahan, we went there now at the conclusion of the official visits and took up residence. As soon as it was known that the official days were over, the Ethiopian boys whom we had sent to France for their studies assembled and came to meet us. And the Reg Massi, who was among them, made the following speech of thanks in the name of all of them. Your Highness, we feel proud in our heart when we read and when we find it written by the foreign historians that our Ethiopian forefathers in ancient time excelled the whole world in wisdom and in strength, and that they were honored and feared as they made their power known as far as the land of Egypt, by establishing their cities in Meroe and Napata. But As it is in Jez's language that all our books in our country were written, and as the skill of printing did not existed, it makes us very sad that apart from a few scholars, the people as a whole do not know the history of the country. But now, through your goodness and your endeavor, the whole world has been impressed by your sending us abroad for study, thinking that Ethiopia will be civilized in wisdom and in knowledge as of the old, and that she will open our eyes. The whole world has been impressed by your founding of the schools at Addis Ababa and in other provinces, by your establishing a printing press and causing ancient books which had been written in Jezes to be translated into Amharic and to be printed, as well as bringing good fortune to the people. We, Ethiopian sons, remain uneasily grateful to you because you have made us study, helping all those of us in difficulty, so that we should follow European civilization and should know Ethiopian history. But now, the distinguished invitation which the European governments have extended to you and not to any of the kings of Ethiopia in the past has come because they know that under your excellent guidance you will cause Ethiopia to be civilized. And your arrival has made the name of Ethiopia heard all over the world. Ethiopia has the duty to thank you, for her joy is not only for the present moment, but will be lasting, transmitted from generations to generation. And we in Paris are convinced of our good fortune in seeing our three-colored flag fluttering suspended on the masts. Therefore, the whole Ethiopian people, the dead ones in heaven, the living ones on earth, are in duty bound to give praise. He concluded speaking at length. In support and encouragement of the speech which had been delivered, we assumed them in the following preparation. Our thought, as we are helping everybody to the best of our ability, is not only for the few of you here, but for all the sons of Ethiopia who should have the opportunity of acquiring education and knowledge. We pray to God that He may grant you to serve your country, Ethiopia, by persevering in education and by acquiring wide knowledge. For the future, have courage, for we shall help you to the best of our ability, so that you should not have any sort of financial difficulty until you finish your studies. They expressed to us their heartfelt joy at what we had said to them. As the official visit ended and we were staying in the specially arranged accommodation, important Frenchmen who had been friends of the Ethiopian government and in particular of HH, my father, as well as of myself, began to arrive and to pay us visits. After this, we requested an appointment with the Prime Minister M. Poincaré in order to discuss amicably several matters, and on the appointed day we went to the Foreign Ministry. What we had intended to discuss was that the French should give us a free getaway to the Sea of Djibouti, and prior to our departure from Addis Ababa, as we informed the French ministers that this was a matter we particularly wished to discuss. Some hope had been given to us. Consequently, if they agreed to do this, they should let us know that it was the French government's wish to have in exchange for this from us. They should let us know what it was the French government wished to have it exchanged for this from us. Secondly, the Treaty of Friendship between Ethiopian and the French governments, referred to as the Kobowiski Treaty, and in particularly the judicial matters laid down in paragraph, were extremely ixum to us, and without abrogating the treaty, the two governments, while maintaining its usefulness, might cause a few improvements to be effected. He gave us his word that he would present our plan to Parliament and that they would think about it in the friendliest possible manner. Chapter 17. About our journey from Paris to Brussels. The Belgian ambassador in Paris had informed us that on the 14th of Junbot, which is your 22nd of May, the King of the Belgians, H.M. Albert, would officially receive us, and therefore we departed from Paris towards the evening and went to Brussels. At the railway station, H.M. King Albert, together with his ministers and his army officers, did us the honour of an unforgettable welcome. It was in the wing of the main palace building in which H.M. lived. The quarters had been prepared for us. We went there and rested a little. Afterwards, he introduced to us H.M. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Leopold, his crown prince, who later on became king, and his daughter, Princess Marie Josie. At the banquet, His Majesty assured us of his complete desire that the firm friendship between the Belgian and the Ethiopian government should in the future continue to grow. Of the things we saw at Brussels and in other Belgian provinces during our stay in the country, the following remained vivid in my memory. The Brussels municipality horse racing, the Bank of Brussels, the Congo Museum, crop improvement and cattle breeding station, Waterloo, where Napoleon was defeated, the city of Ghent and its match factory, the city of Liege and its mutations factory, the city of Antwerp, the city of Morage. We also saw coal mines and other similar industrial establishments. From Brussels to Luxembourg, the Grand Duchess Charlotte of Luxembourg, when she heard of King Albert's invitation to us to visit Brussels, still before departure from Addis Ababa, informed us through the Belgian ministers at Addis Ababa, M. Gerard, that we should visit her country during our journey, as Luxembourg was very near Belgium. We had therefore accepted her invitation, now proceeded from Brussels to Luxembourg. At the railway station, the Grand Duchess' husband, Duke Felix, received us with a large guard of honour, and after that took us to the palace. But it so happened that on the day we reached Luxembourg, the Grand Duchess gave birth to a son. She therefore informed us by letter of her regret at being unable to sit next to us at the luncheon party. We told Prince Felix that it would remain in our hearts as a remembrance of joy that on the day of our arrival in Luxembourg, the Grand Duchess should give birth to a male child. The Prince assured us repeatedly of his pleasure at our visit to Luxembourg, and after taking our leave of the Grand Duchess by message, we returned to Brussels. As our official visit to Brussels was completed, we took our leave of the King and Queen on the 23rd of Junbot, which equals to your 31st of May, and returned to Paris. Our journey to Stockholm, the capital of Sweden. Having come to Europe, we had the intention to visit the countries of Europe as a whole, even though not officially, but because the time was approaching for us to return to our country, and although it was impossible to visit all the European countries, we made a firm resolve to visit at the same time the countries in Northern Europe, which it was convenient for us to inspect, i.e., Holland, Germany, and Sweden. But as we were planning to stay at the Stockholm, the Swedish capital, for about 3 days, we informed the Swedish ministers, and after he had notified his government and obtained permission, he arranged for everything on our journey to go smoothly. Subsequently, on the 29th of Jambot, which is your 6th of June, we departed from Paris and reached Amsterdam by way of Brussels, and after seeing the Dutch city of Rotterdam and The Hague, as our train stopped for about 3 hours at Amsterdam, we made a tour of inspection of the city by car. From there, we travelled through the whole night and at dawn to reach Germany, Alba city of Hamburg. After touring the town for about an hour, we set out for Sweden. After crossing the water called North Sea, which lies between Germany and Sweden, we arrived at Stockholm on the 1st of Seine, which is 8th of June, at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is your 9 a.m. When we reached Stockholm, H.M. King Gustav Adolf had not yet returned from his country home, where he had gone for vacation. We therefore put up at the Grand Hotel Royal. On this day was Pentecost, and therefore the Archbishop Uppsala, Nathan Soderblom, sent an envoy and told us, because of the feast of Paracelete Pentecost, we shall be holding prayers and a sermon towards evening, and we beg that it may be your wish to attend. We departed from Stockholm at 9 o'clock, which is your 3 p.m, and reached Uppsala at 10 o'clock, which is your 4 p.m. The provisional governor and the archbishop received us at the station. Up to the time when the prayers and the sermon began, we inspected the University of Uppsala and the library. In the library, we were very pleased to see some Ge'ez and Aramaic books. When the hour of prayers and sermon came, we went to the church. The archbishop, being at an elevated place, read the appropriate extracts for Pentecostals from the Bible and gave a long sermon. After this, he spoke about Ethiopia as follows. It is a fact that Ethiopia accepted Christianity a long time prior to us. It is only after the steadfast Christians who lived upon these heights of Africa that we Swedes, having accepted Christianity, became families and communities of Christ. And now, it is an unforgettable experience for us to be hosts with friendly guests to the Crown Prince of Ethiopia and Regent Plenipotentiary, who has come from those elevated parts of Africa. When he had finished speaking at length, my heart was touched with joy at his truly inspiring address, and I therefore replied as follows. Your beatitude, all the Christians in the world, although they may be divided in some minor matters, yet in essence there is no one who does not know that there is only one Christ. In former times, on account of the geographical distance, Sweden and Ethiopia did not know each other even by reputation, but now, ever since some Swedes had begun to come to Ethiopia and had recounted in words the beauty of their country and demonstrated by their work the goodness of the people, many Ethiopians wish to see Sweden and to meet the people. There are many who do not know Ethiopia's history and her acceptance of Christianity in the 1600 years ago. But you, knowing her history and by your kindness and sincerity acknowledging Ethiopia's acceptance of Christianity, even before Sweden did so, have spoken with conviction, and therefore I wish to thank you in my own name and in that of the whole people of Ethiopia. Today, on this great day of Pentecostal, Having made the acquaintance of the Swedish people, I express the hope that this may be an omen of progressive strengthening and widening of the friendship of the two realms. When I had finished speaking, all the people assembled there, beginning with the hot bishop, expressed to us the heartfelt pressure. We subsequently returned to Stockholm. Since our visit to Stockholm was private and not official, we had not had any thought of meeting the king. But as soon as the king heard of our arrival at Stockholm, he sent a message that it would give him pleasure if we could meet now that we had come to Stockholm. We accepted his unofficial invitation and went to the seaside palace called Tolugon. The king, together with his quarters, was awaiting us standing by the gate of the palace, and we met him, and we met with warm affection and friendship. When we had rested a little in the great hall, a festive luncheon was served. After lunch, we remained talking about the means by which the friendship between the two governments might progressively develop, and by which the peoples of the two realms might get much closer to each other. Towards evening, about 5 o'clock, we returned to Stockholm. Of what we saw at Stockholm and the surroundings, the following recollection remained in our hearts. The new telephone exchange with 80,000 lines, the iron industry, schools, hospitals, and the Uppsala University Library. Afterwards, on the 6th of Seine, which is your 13th of June, we set out for Stockholm, crossed the North Sea, and when we reached the German city of Hamburg, we disembarked from the train and toured the city by car for about 3 hours, and from the following day, the 7th of Seine, which is your 14th of June, we re-entered Paris. Chapter 18. About our journey from Paris to Rome. We left Paris on the 9th of Seine, which is the 16th of June, and reached Rome on the 11th, which is your 18th of June. The King of Italy, H.M. Victor Emmanuel, and the leader of the government, Signor Mussolini, with a guard of army officers, received us with honor at the railway station, thus causing much pleasure. It was in the Quirinale, previously the Pope's palace, in which His Majesty lived. The accommodation had been prepared for us, and we proceeded there. When we appeared together with the king standing on the upper balcony to salute the people, all the crowd assembled in the square began shouting with one joyful voice, "Long live Italy! Long live Ethiopia! Long live H.H. Crown Prince Tafari!" When they think of this today, how extraordinary must this appear to them? At the banquet, H.M. the King of Italy delivered the following speech. "Your Highness, it has given me great pleasure to welcome Your Highness to the city of Rome with sentiments of amenity. Your arrival today recalls to me the visit a long time ago of your father, H.H. Rasmussen. It is my sincere wish that the government, which God, by His desire, has given in your hands, may continue to prosper. Your Highness, prudence has already done a great deal for the country's prosperity and expansion. Your visit to Italy now will, I believe, progressively strengthen the friendship and the mutual benefit between the two governments. The deeds of kindness which you did for Italy during the Great War will never be forgotten. We, on our part, have greatly assisted Ethiopia to enter the League of Nations. Therefore, the friendship which exists between the two governments will be of mutual benefit." He then concluded by saying, "I pray that God's blessing may descend upon Ethiopia." I then delivered the following speech. "Your Majesty, having come all the way from Ethiopia, My joy is abundant in seeing your Majesty. Your beautiful country and your beloved people. I am indeed fortunate in coming to Rome to bind together the ties of friendship between the two governments, which were established a long time ago. I am very pleased that by your recalling the name of my father, H. Ras Makonnen. All the people who heard my father tell of his glorious welcoming to him when he came to Italy during the reign of King Umberto, your father, were greatly impressed, and now that I have arrived here, I am very pleased about the marvelous reception which your Majesty have extended to me. Henceforth, it is my entire intention to have our affection strengthened and our friendship extended, and I believe that your Majesty's intention is likewise. We Ethiopians consider the speech of the king of a great country to be like a pledge given under oath, and the words spoken by H.M. the King of Italy, as cited here above, seem to us to ungird a stable peace and amenity between the two governments, and it did not appear to us a matter of deceit. On the 12th of Same, which is your 19th of June, we paid a visit to the leader of the government, Signor Mussolini, having requested an appointment to discuss in a friendly manner a number of matters. The subject, which we planned to discuss, was concerned with the amicable granting Ethiopia of a gateway to the northern part of the country from the port of Assab, which had originally been under Ethiopia's rule and was now an Italian colony. After we had met at the appointed hour, I said to him that it would give us pleasure if he were willing to discuss the amicable cession to us the Italian government of a part of the port of Assab as a free zone. From Senegal, Mussolini had listened attentively to this request. He said that he was willing to discuss the matter, and that after conversations with Director of the Political Affairs, Contarini, the latter would let me know the answer. Contarini having been summoned immediately, we were introduced to each other. After we had had meetings and lengthy discussions with him, Contarini, he told me that he would report to Senegal Mussolini everything that we had spoken about, and that the reply would reach me tomorrow by the hands of Conte Colli. We then parted. On the morrow, Conte Colli, the Italian envoy extraordinary and minister plenipotentiary in Ethiopia, came and submitted to us a draft treaty, explaining that this was his government's proposal concerning my request as regards the port of Assab. The following is the text of the draft treaty. First, since it is the determined wish of the Italian government to strengthen progressively the ties of friendship which exists between the Italian and Ethiopian governments, and for the financial and political benefit and prosperity of Ethiopia, the Italian government consigns to the Ethiopian government for a period of 99 years an access point to the sea at Assab, and a place suitable for a railway from the sea up to the Ethiopian frontier, as well as all the localities and houses which are the property of the Italian government and are situated within the town which hitherto had been in the hands of the Italian government. Until the period of this treaty expires, the Ethiopian government has full sovereignty over the access point to the sea at Assab, and over the road to the frontier which it has received from the Italian government. Second, experts whom the Italian and Ethiopian government will choose are to determine the boundaries in the surroundings of the seaport of Assab, including the houses that have been built and the ground required for the construction of the railway from the access point at Assab up to the Ethiopian frontier. And they shall determine the boundary in suit, having regard to what it is needed for access to the sea and for the trade of Assab. Third, the Ethiopian government, being very desirous to strengthen progressively the ties of friendship which existed between Italy and Ethiopia, will not give economic or political benefit to the citizens of any other government except to Italian citizens in the seaport and localities mentioned, as has been agreed in the treaty. All things being equal, precedence shall be accordant to Italian citizens, but the Ethiopian government, if it wishes to employ people in the area, can do what it likes. Fourth, if the Italian government requires a place at which to deposit goods at the gateway to the sea at Assab, the Ethiopian government will let it have a demarcated area. Fifth, when Italian merchants cause merchandise to pass through Assab free zone, they shall pay custom duty at the same rate at which Ethiopian merchants have to pay. 6. The Ethiopian government shall assign the construction of the free maritime zone and for the railway from Assab to Ethiopia frontier to Ethiopian and Italian companies. When these companies are established, the Ethiopians shall pay 2 parts of the money and the Italians 1 part. But if the Ethiopians are unable to raise 2/3 of the money, then the 2 parties alone, without bringing in any foreigners, may form a company and pay the money half and half. 7th, if the Ethiopian government in future concludes a maritime access treaty with another government, and if it finds a location or part thereof that is a free zone at whatever other maritime access point, and if it obtains the genuine advantages, then the Italian government agrees, by drawing this maritime access treaty, to extend the advantages of Ethiopia. Assuming the Ethiopian government concludes a maritime access treaty with another government, and if that government obtains advantages by the treaty, then the Italian government may well derive benefit from redrawing this maritime access treaty. 8th, with regard to the entire question of frontier treaties, previously concluded by the Ethiopian and Italian governments, the 2 parties agree that border problems be finally settled as soon as experts have been selected from both sides. Furthermore, the Ethiopian government undertakes to assist to the utmost extent possible those Italian companies who had accepted the previous treaty obligations as regards agriculture, commerce, public works, and minerals, lest they should encounter difficulties. 9th, as regards the waters of the Juba and Webi, Shibili rivers, the Ethiopian government enters into a contractual agreement not to shut off completely those waters, preventing them from flowing to Italian Somaliland, by offering the benefits to foreign interests, notwithstanding anything required for Ethiopians' own benefit. 10th, the Italian government enters into treaty obligations not to demand any money from the Ethiopian government for granting it a maritime access point at Assab, an adequate ground for the construction of a railway to Ethiopian frontier, together with all the houses and ground at Assab. After we had studied this treaty, we became convinced of the need to inform the council upon our return to Addis Ababa. We therefore told Conte Cortali to inform Senegal Mussolini of this our intention, but for a variety of reasons the draft treaty never came into force. On 14th Sene, which is your 21st of June, we had been given an opportunity to visit the Pope of Rome, Pius, and at the appointed hour we met at the Vatican Palace. The Pope spoke, expressing his pleasure at the fact that Catholic missions were now residing in Ethiopia in peace and security, and that religious freedom was now permitted in Ethiopia, contrary to earlier practice. When we came to take leave of each other, he pronounced a prayer. May God bless the land of Ethiopia, its kings and its people. When we emerged from there, we entered the church of St. Peter and paid homage at the sculpture. After we had seen the beauty of the church, we went to inspect the nearby monastery of St. Stephen, which had been given to the Ethiopian monks. From the earliest times, Ethiopian monks possessed a strong desire to see and to pay homage at our Lord's sculpture at Golgotha and the sculpture of St. Peter and St. Paul at Rome. But when they came to Rome from Ethiopia, they had difficulty in finding lodgings, and it is said that when the Pope, who reigned in 1464, saw their plight, he gave them his ministry, saying, "This monastery of St. Stephen shall be a resting place for Ethiopian monks." As we toured every corner of the church in this monastery, we saw the hew stones on which the names of the 7 Ethiopian monks had been incised. When we were seated in one of the rooms in the monastery, the 7 Ethiopians who had come here to study approached and expressed their joy to us by referring to the antiquity of Ethiopia and the strength of her kings, and by rendering thanks to us. The following are some of the recollections that had remained in our heart of what we saw at Rome and in the province during our stay there. The Crown-like Palace, the Mausoleum of the Kings, the motorcycle races, the Rome municipality, the Vatican and the Church of St. Peter, the Convent of St. Stephen, where Ethiopian boys are studying, the Church of St. Paul and St. John, the Church of Our Lady Mary and of Jesus, the theatre in which the ancient Caesar made Christian fight with wild beasts and slaves fight each other, the Victor Emmanuel II Monument, the military parade at Santo Celi, the Rome museums, the cannon firing at Branciano, the military hospital called Cello, the ships at Spezia, the city of Turin, the Fiat car factory, and the Royal Mausoleum at Turin. When the days of the official visits were over, we thanked HM King Victor Emmanuel for the friendly reception he had arranged for us, took our leave and returned to Paris on the 25th of Seine, which is your 2nd of July. Chapter 19. From Paris to London. On 30th Seine, which is your 7th of July, we set out from Paris and travelled to London. When we reached Calais, we boarded a British ship, and as we began the journey, 2 warships, bedecked with the Ethiopian and British flags, sailed to the right and the left of our boat. Having crossed the sea, we reached Dover and a 21-gun salute was fired. From Dover, we travelled by train, and when we reached Victoria Railway Station in London, the son of His Majesty King George, now himself King, but at the time styled Duke of York, together with many officers and guards of honour, bade us a distinguished welcome in the name of his father. From there we went to the residence which had been prepared for us in a house called Albert Gate, near Hyde Park and Knightsbridge. On the morrow, 1st of Amel, which is your 8th of July, so H.H. the Duke of York informed us, was to be the audience granted by His Majesty King George, and at the appointed hour we went to the meeting. I delivered to His Majesty the following speech. Your Majesty, it has given me great pleasure to see Your Majesty and Her Majesty the Queen in your great capital of London, which was founded a long time ago. Your Majesty is aware that the firm friendship between England and Ethiopia has been established for a long time. For the future, it is the wish of Her Majesty Empress Zawditu, as well as my own, that the friendship of the two governments should progressively develop and strengthen. And we believe that Your Majesty's intention and wish are likewise. When my august father H.H. Ras Makonnen came to London during the reign of your august father King Edward VIII, I was greatly impressed when I heard him tell his officers about all the acts of friendship which had been done unto him. And I, his son, having come to London, derive great pleasure from seeing Your Majesty, your honoured people, and your beautiful capital, and this joy will remain in my heart as a constant memory. Your Majesty, I would assure Your Majesty of my heartfelt wish that they may be long life in health of Your Majesty, Her Majesty the Queen, and the entire royal house. Peace and blessing for your people, prosperity and development of your country. When I had finished speaking, His Majesty replied with the following speech. Your Highness, I thank you from my heart, for I am exceedingly pleased having heard the words of your friendship, which Your Highness has now spoken. I and the Queen are very pleased at your safe arrival in the capital of the British realm, and at our meeting face to face. I express the hope that the friendship which had existed between the two governments for so long may, by Your Highness's arrival, be progressively developed and strengthened in the future. I recall the visit of H.H. your father, Ras Makonnen, as representative of Emperor Menelik at the coronation of my father, His Majesty King Edward. I know full well that Ras Makonnen possessed enduring thoughts of friendship for my country. Likewise, I do not doubt that the same thoughts will forever be with his son. While Your Highness is here, arrangements have been made for you to see, without inconvenience, everything you may require to inspect in my country. Again, while you are with us and enjoying an agreeable and useful time, I hope that when you return to your country, everything you see in England will remain a pleasant memory. Now, in thanking Your Highness once again, I would assure you that it is my intention to consolidate our friendship. I would request Your Highness to transmit upon your return to your country my cordial and respectful greeting to Her Majesty Queen Zawditu. I express to you my wholehearted wish that the Ethiopian realm may have happiness and prosperity, blessings and development. He thus concluded his speech. We subsequently returned to Albert Gate, and about 2 hours later His Majesty came to Albert Gate on a return visit. On the 4th of Haile, which is your 11th of July, an appointment was arranged to discuss some governmental affairs with the Prime Minister, Mr. Ramsay MacDonald, and at the appointed hour we met at the Foreign Office. After Mr. MacDonald had spoken at length about the disturbance which had occurred at the frontiers between the subjects of the two governments, we replied to him as follows. The border settlement has been made on paper only, and the engineers selected by the governments of both sides according to the provisions of the treaty have not delimited the frontiers by a visit on the spot, and no marks have been put in the ground. This is the reason why our subjects and yours have come to blows at the borders. It would, therefore, be better if in future we carried out what is required as soon as possible, i.e., determining the frontier and marking it properly. We told him that there could be no doubt that once this had been carried out, the two sides would observe their boundaries. Mr. MacDonald agreed with this proposal and said that he would arrange that the matter of the frontier determination be begun at once. When we got back, we saw to it that the work of the border delimitations was carried out. The second matter is concerned with the Lake Tana barrage. Mr. MacDonald asked that the Ethiopian government should grant permission to the British government to construct the Lake Tana Dam. We replied to him as follows. We ourselves shall cause the Lake Tana barrage to be built. We can, however, talk about the setting up of a company. Once we had completed the construction of the dam, we told him that we would then lease the water to the government of the Angolan Egyptian Sudan. We concluded by saying that we would transmit details to each other in writing, as we had agreed about the proposal in principle. After this, having asked permission to point out some of the difficulties on our part, we submitted to him the following requests. In the past, in Emperor Menelek's reign, a treaty had been concluded that the Ethiopian government, having purchased the arms it considered necessary for itself, should not be impeded conveying those arms to the country. But now, since the Great European War, we were prevented carrying arms, which we had purchased, and we asked the Prime Minister to permit us the purchase of conveyance of arms as of old. He replied that the British government were unable to resolve the matter on their own, unless they settled this position on the arms embargo in conjunction with the French and Italian governments, and that after consultation among the three governments about this, they would let us know the answer. Secondly, we had experienced great difficulty because the Ethiopian government did not possess a seaport, which would bring about contact with foreign countries. It is a fact that skill and worth are acquired when trade expands, as one nation meets and encounters others by sea and by land. The entire object of the Ethiopian government for the future is to get very close to foreign countries by undertaking the tasks of civilization. Indeed, our accession to the League of Nations last year proves our intention to work for civilization and to develop our country. Therefore, if the British government were to give the Ethiopian government a seaport as patrimony, there would be eternal and unshakable friendship. Hence, I said to the Prime Minister that it would give us pleasure if he would let us have a definite answer before our departure from London. Mr. MacDonald replied, "I had not heard about this matter until now. I am not able to give you an answer immediately, since this has not been debated and determined by Parliament, and I, on my own, am not in a position to decide this. I shall, however, see to it that the matter be submitted to Parliament at the appropriate time, so that its advice can be obtained." On the same day, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Most Reverend Rendell Davidson, gave a dinner party for us, and we left Albert Gate at 7 o'clock to go to Lambeth Palace. After a very pleasant banquet in our honour, the Archbishop made the following speech. "Your Highness, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Your Highness to Lambeth Palace, which is the main centre of the English Church. From time to time, I receive those who are important representatives of the branches of the Church of Christ. But there has never been before visited Lambeth anyone whose church stands, in terms of antiquity, in first place among the Christians of the world. Your Highness, your church has an ancient history of about 1,600 years. Its beginnings approach the even earlier period of the apostles of our Lord. Your church has a history which is related to the time of Anthasius and his companions. Your Highness, it is not only holding on to the ancient traditions, but it is your glory to develop Christian civilization for the future and to spread the Christian scriptures among your people. From your printing press issue, not only ancient and modern religious books, but you yourself are an active participant in the work. The Ethiopian books, which Your Highness has caused to be printed, have an introduction by you. Everyone who studies the books of Chrysostom and of the monk Mark Yeshak will derive much benefit. It is not to be doubted that the main reason of your present journey is to acquaint yourself with the modern Western world. Be it in spiritual or in secular terms, your visit is to all of us a perpetual joy. I feel assured that your country's spiritual and secular well-being is well placed in the hands, and there is due to you every possible assistance of your beneficent endeavours. He concluded by saying, "We condone your friendship and the high hopes. We wish that everything for which you have come here may prosper." On the 5th of Amel, which is your 12th of July, as the official visit ended, we went to Buckingham Palace and took leave of H.M. the King and H.M. the Queen. During the farewell visit, H.M. King George made the following speech. "Your Highness has given me great pleasure by your visit to England to develop and strengthen the friendship of our two governments. Hence, so that you may have constant memorial of your visit to London and of your meeting with us, we are returning to you the crown of Emperor Theodore, which the commander of the British Army at the time of the Magdala campaign had brought back. Although the capture of Emperor Theodore's crown and his removal to England in no way affected Ethiopia's independence, yet to have it said this crown was the crown of an Ethiopian emperor, and to have it appear in a foreign country did not please me. Hence, H.M. King George's gracious permission that this crown of Emperor Theodore now be returned to Ethiopia I was convinced, a great mark of friendship, since I felt very pleased. I expressed to the King my profoundly sincere gratitude." On 11th of Amel, which is your 18th of July, we departed from London at 4 o'clock in the morning, which is 10 a.m., to visit Cambridge University. Before coming to London, while we were still at Rome, the Vice-Chancellor had asked us in writing to be gracious enough to visit the university. After we had reached London, he informed us of his proposal through the Foreign Office, and we therefore went to carry out this engagement. After all the professors of the university had given us respectful welcome, the university's vice-chancellor approached and said, "Your Highness, as we have heard of your initiative and perseverance in leading your country Ethiopia in wisdom and knowledge, we bestow upon you the honorary degree of Doctor of Law." He then gave me the appropriate robes. Immediately afterwards, they arranged for us a great luncheon banquet. At the banquet, the Vice-Chancellor, Dr. E.C. Pierce, made the following speech. "Your Highness, the poet Homer says, the Ethiopians are blameless. Endotus says the Ethiopians are long-lived because they do not drink wine at all. It is a fact that the Ethiopians refused to pay tribute to Cambyses and the Persian kings. Subsequently, they turned back victoriously all who had come to take their country by force. Who does not know the Queen of Sheba, having heard of Solomon's fame, came by camel, bearing spices, gold, and gems, to try the king with riddles? Who does not know that she returned to her country to be the mother of all the kings? Who does not remember, as the centuries unfolded, the descent from David? Who does not know of the being of a family of Queen Candace? All this proves the establishment of the Christianity over the whole of Ethiopia and the possessions of an ancient faith over a long history. A man who had studied at Christ's College in Cambridge University has in recent years revealed to the English people the literature and law books of Ethiopia. Today, there's among us Teferi Makonnen, Ethiopia's crown prince. He follows in the footsteps of his ancestors and possesses knowledge exceeding that of Orientals and the Egyptians. He explores ancient and modern knowledge. He has studied all the ancient Christian traditions. He endeavors to acquire modern science. H. Teferi Makonnen is the first Ethiopian crown prince who has gone up in an aeroplane. He has caused the books of John Chrysostom and of Mark Yeshak to be translated from Ge'ez into Aramaic and had them printed at his own press. These books can be found in the Cambridge University Library. Furthermore, he has built a school for the children of Ethiopia. He ended by saying, "We therefore make known to all of you here, Ethiopia's great crown prince and regent H8 Teferi Makonnen, the hope of Ethiopia, who is descendant from the ancient kings." We replied with the following speech to that delivered by the university's vice-chancellor. It gives me great pleasure to visit Cambridge University, where the fount of learning and wisdom for so many different people rises. I thank you for receiving me with the manifestation of such great pleasure and condone your friendship. Moreover, my joy is immense when you speak of Ethiopia's history, proving the existence since earliest times of independence and the people's adherence to Christianity. Perhaps there remain some people who do not know that Ethiopia's realm possesses great antiquity and it has been established a long time ago. But if they study Ethiopian history carefully, they will be able to convince themselves of the firm existence of Ethiopia's realm prior to the Greeks and the Romans. Our country was well known even at the time of David and Solomon. Since Ethiopia entered the League of Nations last year, it is appropriate for her to draw closer to the nations of Europe. As we have sent Ethiopia's youth to study in Europe and in other countries, and as they are very diligent in their studies, I hope that in a few years' time they will come to Cambridge for their university education and then serve their country when they return after graduation. Upon completing my speech, we took our leave and returned to London. Everything I saw in London was truly amazing. The following sights are the perpetual memory engraved in my heart: Buckingham Palace, the Tower of London, St. Thomas's Hospital, the Houses of Parliament, the Zoology Garden, in which many different wild animals can be seen, the High Courts of Justice, St. Paul's Cathedral, the Wembley Exhibition, the Foreign Office, Lambeth Palace, the residence of the Archbishop of Canterbury, the British and Foreign Bible Society, the Bank of England, and Windsor Castle. There remains with me a great admiration of the goodness of the people in terms of initiate character and habit rather than political motivation. Afterwards, on 14th of Helm, which is your 21st of July, we returned from London to Paris. Subsequently, having come as far as Europe, I felt I could not return to my country without seeing Geneva, where the League of Nations on which world peace is founded, we established and of which we had come members. So, On the 21st of Amel, which is your 28th of July, I went from Paris to Geneva. But as this was the holiday season, the Secretary General was not there, and therefore the secretaries who were there at the time received us with pleasure and showed us all the offices with the various departments. From there we visited the Swiss capital, Benin, and returned to Paris. While it was my determined wish to visit Berlin, the capital of Germany, privately and quite unofficially, I was sad at my ability to go to Berlin in view of the approach of the time at which I had returned to my country. I therefore arranged that Dejemach Haile Selassie, Selu Tashadol, and Tefahi Tegan, among the officials who were with me, should go to Berlin, taking with them a letter of friendship, and after meeting the President Marshal Hindenburg, they were to return. In the treaty with the Franco-Ethiopian Railway Company, there were in some passages matters which at the time gave rise to dispute. We therefore had friendly discussions and agreed without difficulty on 9 chapters, and had much pleasure in putting our signature to it together with that of President of the Company, M. Maxim Gattin. While we had indicated to M. Ponkia, the Foreign Minister, during the period when we first came to Paris, the need to find a free access point to the sea at Djibouti, it so happened that there occurred ministerial changes in the presidency and foreign ministry. Yet, M. Ponkia had given us hope, explaining that they would let us have the reply at another time. And when we asked that they should give us an answer, we were now returning to our country. The following letter was written to us by the Foreign Ministry. 13th Nahash 1924, Paris. To H.H. Tafari Makonnen, Crown Prince of Ethiopia and Regent Plenipotentiary. Your Highness, since Your Highness has asked for access to the sea for the purpose of your country's trade, it would have given me pleasure to convey to Your Highness prior to your departure from here the terms on which the governments of the 2 countries might reach agreement, and to conclude the investigation of the matter based on the firm desire of the government of the French Republic to grant to Ethiopia government the access which you have requested, but with the delay of the President of the Council to return speedily from the country to which he has gone. And since the agreement to be concluded is a matter of importance, the whole government of the French Republic must of necessity deliberate on the matter. Therefore, the agreement has not yet been drafted. The matter which you have requested cannot fail to come about, so as to strengthen the friendship of the 2 governments, and likewise ties of amity which for long have historically bound the French government to that of Ethiopia. I would respectfully inform Your Highness by declaring that, once the matter has again been urgently raised, it will conclude with the firm desire that exists in a written agreement. The time as editor remained unpropitious to expedite the entire agreement upon the basis of the benefits which these 2 friendly and neighboring governments attribute to it. But in the accord, which will undoubtedly be concluded in the future, Your Highness will find a distinct remembrance, based on your visit to France, which justifies the trust you repose in the people's profound friendship. Nothing will be forgotten. to bring about what is necessary, so that the recollection of the friendship and mutual benefit of the two countries will continue to flourish. I would request Your Highness to make known on our behalf to the Empress of Ethiopia, H.M. Zawditu, the good wishes and goodwill which the government of the French Republic cherishes for her and her people's prosperity. Signed, René Renault. Although the draft agreement remained unwritten for the time being, yet we were glad when we read this, for its wording gave hope that an accord would be concluded within the near future. Since we were convinced that the time was approaching when we had to return to our country, we gave orders that the new medal, called Menelik II Medal, be struck, and also that the Menelik II statue be constructed and sent to Addis Ababa. That the new stamps with the effigy of Queen Zawditu and ourselves be printed, and that the books required for the ministerial departments be purchased. Chapter 20. From Paris to Athens, the Greek capital. We had not yet made the acquaintance of the new president of the French Republic, H.E.M. Dogmagu, and we therefore met by appointment at the Chateau de Reblanc. At the same time we ourselves leave, and on the 7th of Nahash, which is your 13th of August, we set out for Marseilles, on our way to Athens. The French authorities and our old friend, M. Lagarde, who escorted us as far as Marseilles, were with us. From Marseilles we embarked on the 9th of Nahash, which is your 15th of August, on a small ship called Amboise. On the 4th day, when we reached the Greek harbour called Parisius, they received us with great honour, aeroplanes hovering in the air, and in the sea warships firing their guns. When proceeding from there, we reached the town of Phaleron. The Greek Prime Minister H.E. Monsieur Sophoulis, with ministers and armed commanders, bade us welcome. From there, we travelled by train to Athens. At the railway station, the President of the Republic, H.E. Admiral Condorius, together with the country's dignitaries and foreign diplomats, received us. We immediately went to the principal church at Athens, where Archbishop Chrysostomus pronounced the prayer of blessings, and after that we proceeded to the palace, where lodgings had been prepared for us. At the banquet in the evening, the President Admiral Condorius spoke of the friendship which had remained steadfast for a very long time between the two countries, as well as the close-knit history of the two peoples. We, on our part, told him that from the time immemorial Athens had been source of wisdom and knowledge, that we had discovered and read in our history of goodness of the Greek people, and we declared our intention henceforth to render assistance to all Greeks living in Ethiopia. On the next day, we visited the Acropolis, the ancient sanctuary of gods and idols. When we returned from there, we went to see the academy and various museums. On the 13th of Nahash, which is your 19th of August, they showed us various displays of gymnastics at a place called Stadium, as well as several kinds of military parades. Towards evening, we went to see Athens University and the head of university, Monsieur Dimitri Papapoulos, standing at the elevated place, made the following speech. Your Highness, it is in the midst of Athens University that the soul of Greece is being revealed. This evening we are pleased to welcome the representatives of a people tied to Greece by inseparable ties and by friendship that is based on ancient historical traditions. Your Highness, presence among us is apt to strengthen and to renew these memories of 1600 years. Two Greeks, the son of Meripois and merchant Phramatus and Adasius, were taken prisoner at the Ethiopian seaboard and thus entered the country. They founded the Church of Ethiopia by teaching the country's inhabitants and by becoming apostles of the faith. Your Highness, the affection which binds the two countries together began at that time. In the year 32, Athens, the great bishop of Christian Greece, bestowed at Alexandria the name of founder of the Church of Ethiopia upon Phramatus, and did so with great joy. And he also anointed him bishop of the Ethiopian Church. Again, in a different context, Hilarius of Emmaus refers to these historical memories in the book of Romans, which he wrote. In this book, he presents the Ethiopian king's daughter as beautiful and comely. The Ethiopians were very well known to Homer and Herodotus, who refers to them in his history, and to Strabo, who speaks about them a great deal in his geography. By virtue of these old traditions, the kings of modern Ethiopia have always cultivated true friendship with Greece. Above all, Emperor Johannes, Emperor Menelik have uttered words of sincere affection for our country in exchanges of letters with Greek government. Your Highness, our brothers who live in your country are always telling us with feelings of deep gratitude of the welcome and friendship they have encountered among your people. This goes so far that it's virtually granted to them to be like brothers. We are very glad, therefore, to receive today as guest among us the representative of this people. Greek writers who have described the details of this journey and W. Ho's books are read in benefit, have empathically shown the extreme natural beauty of Ethiopia. They have described the different kinds of air currents, trees, and leaves, as well as the beauty of the sun, which through its light reveals the beauty of the country. Your Highness, for a long time now the Greeks have considered everything that is good for your country as their own advantage. Each time they have found an opportunity, they affirm the thoughts of friendship which they have for the king of Ethiopia and for the people. This feeling does not only arise from the friendship which you have for us. What we have achieved in our past history and by our character is due to our respect for the supremeness of learning, the complete love of freedom to the point of heroism. Therefore, it is not at all a strange thing for us to considerate our friendship for the Ethiopian people through the study which our history affords us. We are aware that Ethiopian success is guarding independence at all times, arises from the mountain which have been given to her by nature, and which separates her from all the other African countries. It is proper to say that Ethiopia has been given the bastion of Christianity for more than a millennium, among the savages and pagans in the arid desert. Omar said of the Ethiopian that they excelled above others. Dictorius speaks of their virtue. He admires the fight for their freedom. At the time of Alexandria the Great and his heirs, Greek culture had entered Ethiopia and had opened a new road of civilization. It left written monuments, a map, which demonstrates its progress. The Ptolemies and the Belinthias kings desire the Ethiopian people to establish a bias and to extend their rule up to the Red Sea. When Byzantium fought for the Persians, it threw into battle the might of the Ethiopians. Your Highness's country was a crossroad and meeting point of the civilized nations in the Mediterranean and Indian areas. Since the Greeks were at the time held in great honor in Ethiopia, the Ethiopian kings are said to have known the Greek language. According to those who have studied the history of Ethiopian church, in the 4th century this church, strong in its faith, was doing everything that was necessary to enable the Christian religion to spread over all the distant lands in Africa. But the rise of Islam and its constant and progressive growth greatly weakened the strength of the Ethiopian people, as Islam defeated by the force of the sword, but eventually defended themselves with the heroism which derives from their nature. The Ethiopian overcame the might of the Muslims. They built once again the church of Askum at the place to which the Muslims had set fire. It might be said that the rebuilding of this church is a great good fortune and luck of Ethiopia. By the intelligence of its kings and rulers since the last century, this country has once again taken the road of renewal. It is this road of renewal that is leading this beloved and courageous people towards national unity in equality. The University of Athens, at this place where the leaders of the Greek people are assembled, greets the courageous ruler of Ethiopian people, the son of Makonnen. He concluded by saying, "The Greek people request that you will accept the best wishes for the prosperity of the Ethiopian people, as well as the firm resolve for progressive strengthening of ties of friendship which exists between the two nations. We are pleased to hear these words of friendship gleaned from ancient history and express our profound gratitude." We then returned to the palace. On the morrow, we went to visit together with Archbishop Chrysostom and with other scholars very knowledgeable in history, the Areopagus where St. Paul instructed the Athens. The place is in the vicinity of the Acropolis. The Archbishop spoke at length about the history of this locality, citing the Acts of the Apostles. We had, of course, frequently read in history books of Athens as the font of wisdom and learning, and now we were glad to see it with our own eyes. Of all the things we had seen in Athens, the following are the main memories we had retained in our hearts. The temples of gods and idols of the Acropolis, the Areopagus, the Academy and various museums, the library, the university, the gymnastic displays, and the military parade at the stadium, the theatre of Herodotus Atticus by the ruins of Acropolis, and the fireworks projected into the air by the seashore at Ferelon, spread out in the sky in the shape of the Ethiopian flag.